Welcome to the Beyond Body podcast with your hosts, Mia and Holly. Join us for a sometimes fortnightly podcast
where we explore all things mental health, being a messy human, and how to get the most out of this one precious life.
and all the ridiculous stories in between. Welcome back, Hol.
Great to be back. I feel like it's been ages since we've done a little chitty chat, just us talking. I feel like it's forgotten how to talk.
I know, we're so organized. We've got all these episodes banked, and then by the time we come back, I'm like, oh, how do I?
It's how do you plug in the microphone? Yeah. How do you do this? Record the screen? It is good to be back, though. Welcome back to Australia. Welcome back
Thank
from Bali.
you. That was a little too long of a wait to get to Bali, but I was very happy to be there and get some time off. And obviously, I've mentioned in a video that I put up that I also went and checked out a retreat space for some stuff that we have in the works for next year.
Very exciting. A few things in the works.
Yeah, I wish I could have teleported you there because that was, even though it was a work day, it was one of my favorite days there because it was just, I didn't want to leave. I was like, can I just stay here? Can I cancel my Airbnb and
move in?
Yeah.
Can I just live here forever?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So that's a bit of a watch this space scenario, but very exciting stuff coming for next year. You, my dear, are preparing to head off. So your life is much more exciting than mine at the moment.
I mean, I feel like you made a mistake going away at the very beginning of winter because now you have to come back and have the rest of winter. I've planned it perfectly. However, I am getting ready to jet set for my European summer. This time in a fortnight,
Yeah.
I will be drowning in Portuguese tarts and pretending that I like espressos, and I don't.
Really?
Hate them. When I go to Europe, I try to get around the culture and drink espressos, but I hate them. I can't even pretend I like them. I feel like
So why are you drinking them?
because I want to do the thing and have a little biscotti and drink the espresso. The European people will just see through my inauthentic coffee decisions. I'm a weak cappuccino girly through and through.
Yourself with your espresso and then dumping it out.
I'll send you a photo. I'll definitely try.
Please. I'm sure they have oat milk there as well. Also, you are responsible for my new oat milk obsession. So thank you for that. You have literally changed my life.
You're welcome. See, that's funny because I've kind of gone back to full cream milk because I'm like, oh, it's so creamy. It's good to change it up sometimes.
Agreed. Variety is the spice of life. So yes, I'm very excited to live through you and your upcoming adventures, and we will still be podcasting where we can find friendly time zone pockets. So it will be very exciting to be able to sort of get your updates about what food you're forcing yourself to eat to get the Instagram photo.
It will be us recording podcast with me in some random corner of an Airbnb trying to set up the microphone on a bench.
Holly will not be on video for this week because her internet is literally being she's having to turn a wheel to get any power going.
Holding it out the window.
To us with 2 tin cans. Anyway.
You're recording a podcast.
We are. This is actually us not just having a chat. So we wanted to do a Q&A this week because we really enjoyed the last time we did this, and you guys always come up with such interesting questions and such a variety of things that we may not think to touch on. So we did a bit of crowdsourcing this week again and went and collected some questions that you had for us. Recovery stuff, obviously. Questions about our experiences, a couple of fun ones thrown in there as well. So are you ready to get stuck in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So first one, I don't think I've ever been asked this in this format before. Can I stop recovery if I'm seeing it's not working?
I mean, the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
You can stop recovery at any point. You're not bound by law.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we really attempt to instill in clients through this work is autonomy. And that means taking responsibility for your healing. And that means you have to make the moves and no one can make them for you. And if that means you're choosing to stop recovery, that's your decision.
Mm-hmm.
So the choice is yours, but you have to take responsibility for that. But if what you're experiencing is feeling like recovery isn't working, I would definitely encourage someone to explore that a little bit more and really try to understand why do you feel like it's not working? Because if you're feeling like it's not working because you're experiencing more intense emotions than you previously have, or you're feeling more discomfort, or you're feeling overwhelmed and just a bit lost because something that has been giving you a sense of perceived safety is, slowly being dismantled, and it's bringing up a lot of fear that's intensified. That's not recovery not working. That's the process. And the process, yes, is very nuanced to the individual, but what is a collective experience of recovery is that there are parts that are messy and tricky, and we'll all have dips and troughs that can make it feel like it is getting harder before it gets better. And that is often the case, right? Or maybe it's the experience if you feel like it's not working because you just haven't yet found the approach or treatment or team that are going to best be able to support you getting from A to B. I think it takes a while to really find a process and a group of people, or even like a method that really helps you connect in with the experience and find and access that desire to keep making those small steps forward. What's that? I feel like I say it in the one of the retreat workshops, that Thomas Edison quote that's like, I haven't failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And like figuring out recovery is kind of like that. You have to figure out the way that works for you.
Yeah, completely. I had the same initial response where I was like, you can, like, you can stop if you want. Like, no, truly, at some point, I mean, obviously there can be earlier stages and caveats around age. Like if somebody is under 18, they may be in a position where they don't feel like they can stop. But ultimately, in the long trajectory of your recovery, you can get off the recovery train wherever you want to. That's one of the caveats that I, work into any of the conversations that I have around full recovery, especially like in consultations. And people have a lot of questions about like, what's your expectation of me, that I'm meant to commit to this outcome from when we start working together? And I'm like, no. You can get off this train whenever you like. And we're going to have plenty of built-in pit stops where we go, okay, what have we learned? How far have we come? How did we get here? And what do you want to do next? And that's not all the way through to the very end. It's just to the next pit stop. So hopefully this is changing within the space where there is collaboration and there is sort of checking in and people feel like they are in charge of their own process. But I think that this question, when I get this question, the impression I get is that this person hasn't been given that information usually, that this is their process, this is their precious process, this is their, as you say, responsibility, but it's also for them to be in the driver's seat. And sometimes we do have treatment setups where people are not given that impression or told outright that that's not the case. So it's really about mindset shifts and reflections, as you were saying. How are we defining not working? How are we defining that this is not a functional or practical kind of process they're in that is actually moving them forward? Is it how they feel about it? Can they see practically that there is progress here, but they feel terrible, or they feel stuck, or they feel ambivalent, or they feel like they're being forced? Is it your feelings versus actual measurable steps that you're taking? So I think it's less about asking yourself, should I stop or shouldn't I? And more about, why do you want to?
I feel like sooner or later in everyone's recovery, they're going to come to a point where they're like, am I still doing this thing? Am I going to like keep doing this thing? Because maybe at the beginning you just thought, all right, so there is definitely a bit of change I want to make in my life. Like these behaviors aren't serving me. We'll move towards that. But then sort of you will have so many different like these pit stops of being like, okay, well, here we are now. How do we keep going? Do we want to keep going? And it does. I think there's so much power, right, in getting that person in the driver's seat and being like, hey, well, like you're making the next turn. We're just here for the ride, really.
And I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll get the impression from clients, well, not the impression, sometimes I'll just say it outright, where they're like, but you're making me, and if I don't do this goal this week, then you're going to. And I'm like, well, who said that? Like, I'm not making you do anything. If you don't, and I say to them, if you don't want to do this week, you don't have to. And if you don't want to do any of it, you don't have to. And they're like, no, but I do want to. I'm like, okay, well then from that perspective, let's talk about what we can do this week versus some of this inner talk that starts to creep in about like, I'm being made, or this is treatment versus me. And I'm here with my eating disorder, and my eating disorder and I are on the same page. And, basically like getting a case of the fuck it. It's like, fuck everyone else and fuck this and fuck you and all that sort of stuff that is understandable. But instead of allowing that to, or allowing your eating disorder to use that as an opportunity to align itself and be like, see, I'm for you and everyone else is against you. It's more, it's always, why is that feeling presenting the way that it is, versus immediately reacting and going, I have to make a decision. I'm dumping recovery or I'm going to continue. It's like, what if you just create a little bit of space to reflect and think about it and weigh it all up and then make a choice. Because when you're operating reactively, you're not really making a choice. You're really just under the duress of really big emotions and panic and fear and all these things that your eating disorder uses against you to make choices that you might not otherwise make if you gave yourself a bit of space, talk to one of your providers about it, talk to a loved one about it, gave yourself some time to do some dialoguing, some journaling, and be like, I'm gonna give myself 24 hours just to really look at the landscape of what's going on.
Oh my God, absolutely. And I think on that as well, eating disorders love a little teen angst moment.
Oh yeah.
Like everyone's eating disorder, particularly at different points of engaging in treatment, will be like, fuck you all, I'm not doing this my way or the highway. It's like, okay, are we actually just feeling scared and we need to soothe the really important part of us? Because even behind that, can I give up? It's like, hey, well, what are the emotions that are present there? It's like, are we just actually feeling scared? Are we feeling afraid? Why? What can we do about that?
So next one, bit more about our experience. What helped you the most in recovery?
Well, I'm so curious about yours. You tell me first.
Mine is actually really linked to the first question, which was taking ownership of my recovery. Knowing that no one else is going to do it for me. That didn't mean that I was alone. I think that people can feel a little bit like, oh my God, like it is just me out here on a ranch by myself. That's not true. You have a safety net underneath you, hopefully, from support system and treatment and all that sort of stuff. But that nothing's going to happen unless you make it happen, which wasn't just an enormously important turning point for my recovery. It taught me so much about really key aspects of life as well. We've talked about this before. I think I even said it in the most recent episode that went up the day before we're recording this, which is you don't get the reward unless you're willing to go through the discomfort first. It's not reward first and then discomfort, which is an eating disorder, which is immediate relief and then a lot of really painful consequences that follow. It's the other way around. It's the investment in I'm willing to tolerate and withstand discomfort and hard work and not getting the reward for all the things that I'm putting into this process to get this very valuable long-term reward, which is more than worth the effort that I've put in. Because there's so many areas of my life where I otherwise probably would have done a lot of waiting and a lot of waiting for the light bulb to go off, waiting for someone to knock on my door and like hand me an opportunity, or waiting for it to feel right or it to feel easy, and realizing that that's such a time killer. Like it's a thief of time to be like, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait to be ready. I'm going to wait for it to be easy. I'm going to wait until somebody wants to do it for me. It was the formula that came to the surface. And I was like, that makes so much sense. This recovery format of being willing to put in time and effort into something where I have no idea really what the outcome is going to be or that it's guaranteed, but I'm prepared to do it in the hope of something really amazing on the other side. And if you can learn that trick and how to do that, it will benefit you over and over and over again, much further than recovery will even take you.
That's so powerful. You describing that now has just, I've got this light bulb of like in my first psychology session when I went into recovery, my psychologist said this thing to me. I didn't really get it then, but I think this is what she was implying. Then she said to me, she was like, no one's coming to save you. And I was like, I've literally hired you. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, you're fired. But like, this is what she was trying to really instill in me. It's like, you have to be the one who's going to do this, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And you can have support and that's all wonderful. And I think people hear this one of two ways initially. They're like, oh my God, I'm all alone. And if I don't do it, like no one's coming to pick up all the pieces. And it's like, that can seem scary because it does sometimes feel like a lonely endeavor, but it's also when you learn to be the most consistent person in your life and you learn to show up for yourself, this is where true control is. If people are looking for control in eating disorders, is making yourself the most consistent, reliable person in your life so that you are all you need. That's not ideal. We are, pack animals. We need each other. But when it comes down to it, if you need to get yourself out of a tricky spot, you don't have to wait for anybody to come and find you and dig you out.
Yeah. And I think, this is obviously something that like helped you the most in recovery, but I also am very aware, like you also embody this. Like this is very just much like a life skill that you now use all the time. It's like, I think so useful being like how these things that were so, because I feel like I relate to similar in what I'll share in a second about what got me through it. It's like just very much like now something that I take into life and I live with every single day. It's like it's such a gift, some of these experiences, because that, right, like you're describing, it's not directly like a recovery skill, right? It's just like something you learn through the process.
Yeah, had to, right? Like had to come out swinging out of a corner to get myself out of that situation.
Yeah.
But there's a number of gifts that I think this process gave me, but that's the one that's shown up over and over and over again.
Mm. I said that the thing that helped me most in recovery was, and I mean, mine's a bit less practical, bit more like metaphorical, as per, was finding a home within myself. But to me, it really started with finding softness in spending time on my own and being in my own company and finding joy in that time. And from doing that, it felt a lot easier to then just relax into life without feeling like I had to fill the space all the time with, someone else's imposed expectations of what my life should look like or what my social life should look like or what my downtime should even look like. And this was really the birthplace for me of learning a lot about myself, because that was outside of the really practical recovery stuff, outside of the societal noise, this is where I learned to meditate and really focused on hobbies, and I was spending time in nature, and I was just putting intentional effort into learning about things that I was curious about. This looks like me taking myself on dates to galleries and beaches and out for meals. And I think this softening to myself through these like tangible activities and this really intentional slowness meant that I started to understand myself more and what I liked and what I didn't like and what made me smile and what songs made me want to dance and what decisions in my day would make me more excited to get out of bed the next day. And maybe this was as simple as looking forward to like a yoga class or a new cafe that I was loving, but all these things, as simple as they are, they really help me understand how I can also support myself on those days where I didn't want to get out of bed. And, this was in turn then so complementary to my recovery because it helped me care less about other people's opinions and reactions, because I was really forging my own thing. Like I had my own thing going on. So I didn't feel as much of a need for external reassurance about like, what am I doing in my life and what are you doing on the weekend? And that was okay, because I was finding and achieving that sense of okayness more and more on my own, and really started looking forward to those times where I'd be like, no, I'm just doing something on my own. Like I don't want to go out tonight. And it really just helped me stay in my own lane without feeling like this need to mold my life to a set of timelines or, any external beliefs. And not to mention as well that I think carving out this space and everything else what I did in that space to just simply learn to be as opposed to do, because all those things that I was doing, the intention was to be present in them. And I think that really gave me the framework to be able to witness all of my emotional patterns and triggers and big feelings and small feelings and ugly feelings without needing to run away from them. Because I think when you have a sense of home within yourself, there's nowhere to run to, right? Because that sense of home already feels safe. And I think, it's such a like congruent thing with eating disorders or anyone who kind of struggles with maladaptive behaviors. But I think so often we abandon ourselves because we want to be anywhere other than where we are in this moment with this hard feeling that we are in that moment perceiving as intolerable to feel. But when you've created a life and an internal space that you don't want to run from, it becomes so much more natural to witness and observe and accept just the chaos of our emotions. That's going to happen to everyone from time to time, because there's this underlying feeling of safety that none of these emotions, like even the hardest ones, are going to compromise that. And I mean, I think like it's funny, this is like not at all a direct recovery strategy or tool by any means, but it does really speak to, I think, the importance of just general self-development through any healing journey.
Yeah. And that, sense of safety that you can create for yourself is so, that's why I think we talk about it a lot, like trying to seek out external measures of worth and safety, and whether that's like through manipulating the body or focusing on numbers or behaviors or believing this far off dream that this body is going to bring you this sense of security and confidence, that you finally feel at home in it and you'll finally feel safe in it and acceptable and worthy. And as we always say, it is such an inside job and it's not easy. It takes really kind of having to put yourself, like when you talk about, comfortably spending time by yourself and trying to find safety in that and comfort in that and joy in that, where initially we have resistance to that because we've done everything we can to not be alone with ourselves and not be in the quiet and not listen to what's happening in our heads, but to create these practices that eventually start to become really precious to us. I've experienced that as well, where I was always go, 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 and always trying to be anywhere but with myself, anywhere but quiet in my head, anywhere but, in four walls on my own, just, having to sit with what was really going on. Versus now, my time with myself is so precious. It is so
Mm.
important to me, just not feeling like I have to run away from my life, run away from myself,
Yeah.
and really be prepared to, as you always say, whether it's, the deep, dark, bad feelings or it's the wonderful, joyful feelings, the point is to be able to sit with all of it and not
Mhm.
abandon yourself there.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think an affirmation that I had through my recovery that is just, it was something that I would say to myself every single day in meditation and like every single day when I was like sitting down for a meal or whatever it was. And it's so simple. It was just simply like, just stay, Holly, just
Mm.
stay. And it's like, stay with the good, stay with the bad, stay with the meal, stay with the experience, just be here. And I think it's such a common conversation we'd have with clients. I'm sure you have this conversation as well all the time, where clients feel like they are like behind or they've lost time.
Mhm.
And I think because of that, they feel this like need to push forwards and achieve and be on to the next thing and then the next thing. And because some of these aspects of life, that I'm describing, like the simplicity and the play and hobbies and mindfulness, they aren't held with the same importance as, work, study, striving,
Mm.
because they don't have that monetary value or that, correlation with like, I don't know, societal, like approved productivity, but they are the ways we meet ourselves. They're the ways we come back to ourselves. And I think once you figure out what a sense of home feels like within you, you can always come back to that. It's always there. On the weekend just passed, I went and did a 3-day Vipassana, little like silent meditation. And I thought going into this, like, it's not 10 days, it's 3 days. Like, that's going to be so easy.
Mm.
It's super hard.
Yeah.
I was like
Did you
very
take your
humble.
tweezers this time?
No, no, I didn't. But I
You
did
left your
take
leg
a
hairs
little
alone on
journal.
this one?
No, but you know what I did? And this is so TMI. I was like a day in and I was like, oh my God, I just really want some nail clippers. I was like desperate to cut my toenails. I was like, I get so much weird satisfaction from that. I was actually going to go ask if I had a first aid kit that I could look through. And I was like, okay, focus on the task at hand. You're here to meditate. But I was so humbled because it was so hard still. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, meditating for 10 hours a day is hectic.
Yeah.
But it was so beautiful because the first day I was like, having these thoughts of I want to cut my toenails and like do all these things. And then by the second day, I was like, okay, we've arrived. Like, this is it. We're back. This is home now. And it was just so beautiful. It just took me that 24 hours to be like, oh, this is what this space feels like that I love so much. And I feel so much tenderness for, and I feel so grounded and so content in this. And it's so easy to go astray from it. We're all going to do it because we have to live, in this like sympathetic nervous system where we're like doing and going and talking and conversations and business and whatever, but just to be able to find the ways in which we can return to that. To me, that is very much what got me through recovery. And also it's just what keeps me myself, I think.
I think it also just makes life so much more expansive in that you're not limited to, I can only do this if I do it with other people, or if like the amount of people where they'll say to me, oh, I really want to go here, but like no one wants to go. And I'm like, just go. And they're like, I couldn't go on that trip by myself, or I couldn't go there. And I'm like, why not? Like I wouldn't hesitate. In fact, many times I'll plan to go somewhere on my own and someone in my life is like, can I come? And I'm like, no, no, you can't. We have like holidays we do with people, and then we do trips where no one is allowed, and we put a phone in a drawer and we talk to nobody. Because I think that if you have any conditions on what you want to do, you're so limited. And I think that one of the things that people struggle with is like, oh, I can't do that on my own, or I can't be alone, or whatever it is. And so you're so limited to so many experiences, like you said, like taking yourself out for lunch, like going places where you're not in a place of lack where it's like, oh, I would actually enjoy this if I was with someone. It's looking at it through a different perspective of, I can experience this in a very specific way that can only be done if I do it by myself. Like something that you've just done the last 3 days, like that requires a level of self-reliance and solitude, which makes the experience amazing, right? Versus, yeah, just having that condition of I can only do these things if I am reliant on other people to do it. It's like we
Yeah.
want options. We want every
Yeah.
option on the table. Get
Yeah,
comfortable with it
absolutely.
all.
I feel like I wouldn't be, my current life is very much digital tumbleweed, just moving around everywhere.
Mm.
But I wouldn't be able to do this if I wasn't comfortable with my own time because I have spent a lot of time on my own. Like I'm about to go away for 4 months on my own.
Yeah. But knowing you, she will have a best friend in every single city within like 24 hours.
If anyone's listening from Europe, I am in the market for friends. So
We'll have like a little
we'll
have a little live map with like your little bobblehead moving around the we'll get like a little animation of you moving around the map.
I'm a great wine date.
Can vouch for that. All right. On to a more personal one. Favorite or funniest moment together? You go first.
Okay. I feel like, generally, I think probably some of the moments in our first retreat were like super special because we were doing everything for the first time and, doing something that had been, over a year in the makings. And as any like big new endeavor does, it felt really big and scary and exciting. So I think being able to do it together and just bring that dream to life was super special. But I think in that particular, there were just so many laughs, which were like mostly coming from this place of hysteria because we were so exhausted, but so happy. And this was also the point, like the retreat, where we didn't yet realize that we needed full-time help, which now we have.
Yeah.
So we were doing a lot of extra stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember there was this one night and we'd like had a great day with everyone and we were like driving back to where we were staying and like you just started to feel really unwell and really sick in the car, like really quickly. And then you were like, I'm just getting really hot. Like, I don't know what's going on. And then I realized that I'd accidentally put your seat warmer on like the hottest heat. And it was like November. I was like, I don't know what's wrong with you.
I was like, Holly, I think I'm going through like perimenopause or something. I was like, I'm literally sitting there like, you're talking to me. And I was like, I can't focus on what she's saying because not only was I getting hotter and hotter, like the heat was rising from my butt right up to my face. I was like, then I started to get panicked because I was like, am I going through perimenopause? This is a hot flash. This can't be anything else but a hot. And then I was like, can I tell her that I think I'm going through like a perimenopausal flash? And then you were like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. And it was searing. Like you could have cracked an egg on that thing and had breakfast.
Yeah. They
Forgot
they get real hot. Sorry, that was a huge self-sabotage towards you on my part.
I forgot about that. Yeah, mine was definitely retreat. And as far as like funniest moments, I think we have a lot of them. Like you're one of the people who I can like just get, and especially in professional settings, it's not great because I will start laughing and I can't stop. And it's over nothing. Like one of us has like dropped something in the kitchen or like we've bashed into each other, like backing up, like unpacking things. Like it's anyone else would watch and be like, that's not funny. And I will be in hysterics and then just that rolling laughter where I can't reel myself back in.
It'll just be that little side eye. And you'll be like, don't start. I'll be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm usually like, Holly, don't look at me. Don't look at me. I will not be able to stop, which is so like, I cherish that always so much. Anyone who can get that kind of laughter out of me, because it's not something that people can commonly do, because it's just so like, it's so silly and it taps into like that young, like, when you're at school and something happens and your like teacher says something weird or mispronounces a word and then you're in the background like everyone is just in hysterics and can't control themselves. Like I was that student where they were like, Mia, you need to leave the room until you can get yourself together because this is like everyone is just totally disrupted at this point because as you know, I don't have the most restrained laugh. It's not exactly like a diminutive, very sweet little, bell of a laugh. And so I really cherish that because I think especially as you get older, you're less likely to maybe like give yourself permission to be silly in that way.
Right? Absolutely. And be able to find those different expressions of you in different environments and particularly in like, I think it's been so cool for us because our job is really serious most of the time. I'm like talking a podcast.
Yeah.
And so be able to like find that level of like just play and joy and silliness in new environments, but still in like a work sense. It's like, it's so fun. It's so great.
Yeah. And then my favorite moment was definitely post-retreat when we were meant to go and pack up the house. And then I was like, we're not packing up the house. I'm going to get wine and it was a beautiful sunny afternoon. And we just sat in the backyard and hours and hours and hours went by. And then I think we got like a beautiful message from someone who had just left.
Oh, this
And
is
we
such
just
a
both
nice
burst into
moment.
tears.
You
And I was like,
did.
can we hug? And you were like, yes, we can hug. And then we were just like, it was just that full moment of like, we did this. It was amazing. Like everyone felt so connected. We'd seen like the lights go on in people's eyes. And like, obviously, because we've been through it and now we're building this thing together. It was just on so many different layers. It was like purpose, meaning, joy, friendship, connection. It was just like everything intersecting and just such a full circle moment in so many areas.
Oh, that was so special. That's a great memory. I'd forgotten about that. That was super special. Did we regret it the next day when we had to go and pack up to the house after having a few wines? Yes, we did.
I think I was like countdown to like, when can I go and get us Vietnamese rolls and like a large chips?
Right. They don't open until 11.
I know. I was like, I'll be back. I'll be back. Go and have a nap in the car for 10 minutes. So yeah, I think it's no surprise that is where so many of our really good memories are.
Yeah.
But I think we're collecting them all the time. How did you start to gain friends during recovery?
So I don't think I necessarily lost friends during recovery or like when I was unwell, but I definitely started to shift my preferences of what kind of friends I wanted to make. So I think there's sort of like, there's one part of it, which is, trying to reconnect with people that maybe you became distant with. But then I also think there's this new aspect of just really wanting to make new friends, which I definitely did want to do. So I think in that time, how I made a lot of friends was through activities, obviously, and hobbies. I actually joined a social netball team, which was like one of like the first things I had kind of done, like very much out of my like social comfort circle, comfort zone space.
You just mushed it all together. It's perfect.
And it was a hoot.
Yeah.
It was so much fun because also it was really good to create this new relationship with movement where it was like fun and silly and like it was so fun. But for context, like no one in my life has ever said that I'm an athletic person or that I've never been naturally good at sports. Like anything that involves like balls, nets, rackets, shoes, grass, and oval. Like I was never going to be good at it. I mean, I played netball in school, but I was like, would get the excellence award, but be in Div 6. Like it's like not much to write home about, right? So like knew the rules. So then came onto this social netball team and it was a mixed team. So obviously like despite the like natural height advantage of the male players, they had no idea of the rules. So boys are just like pegging balls from one end to the other and trying to like,
it's like they're like, it's water polo, it's basketball.
Yeah, like
they have no idea.
And just dribble the ball and getting like called offside, like literally every 3 seconds. And it was just so fun because it was just chaos. And I just remember I like did it with this group of people who I didn't know, and then you'd I think it was like in Clifton Hill in Melbourne on a Wednesday night or something, and you go and have a beer at the pub, and it was just with like all these really random people that also just wanted to like make friends and have fun. So that was such a great way to meet people. But I think what is important here is that you actually have to create the environments that are conducive to meeting people. On the last episode that we did that was released yesterday with Byron Dempsey, he was speaking about that it is really hard to make friends in your 20s or 30s even, just as an adult generally, which we've spoken about as well, because that is the thing. If you're sitting on the couch waiting for friends, like they're just not coming. You really have to go out and create these environments where you potentially could make friends. And I also think on that, you have to be patient because friendships are like, they need nurturing like a little flower, I think, but you have to be bold and you have to put yourself out there. And that means you're, practicing a really important recovery skill of emotional risk taking, which means doing something where you could be uncomfortable and you could be rejected and you don't get to have control over that, but you do get to have control over how you respond to it.
It's so part of the exposure work that we do, right? Which is why I really love like the help seeking, connection and boundaries portion of the work that I do with people, because it is really having to take those inner beliefs about either your current relationships or potential friendships or asking for help or whatever it is, and like taking those beliefs and really looking at them. But that's not enough. It's kind of like writing out your values doesn't do anything. Actually taking the steps to embody them and live by them, even when it's uncomfortable, that's how you see momentum and you see progress. And so helping people to set even goals around friendship and reaching out and expressing needs and, coming up with strategies and then coming up with how would we respond if a few different scenarios happened. But you can do all of that, but just like you can't think your way out of an eating disorder, you can't think your way into meaningful connection with people. You actually have to go and expose yourself to these situations, and then, as we know, learn to deal with whatever the response is, and most importantly, pay attention to like what you tell yourself about that, whether or not it goes well or it doesn't go to plan.
Totally.
It's always, but then what do I tell myself about myself or about the situation?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just theorize or hope or wish your way into friendship. You have to be, and I think very often, if you have an eating disorder, you're very likely not great at help seeking, not great at expressing your needs. You're probably, in many cases, the passive participant in a lot of your relationships. And so what
Yeah.
it might take is just a switch in approach, which is I'm going to be brave and I'm going to be the one to reach out and put in the legwork and really nurture this relationship and take a more active role in it. But all of that requires bravery and actually taking
Yeah.
action.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the likelihood of someone saying, that friend at work who you think is like sweet and you want to have a coffee with on the weekend, they're probably going to say yes to it. But being okay, knowing that they might not, and that not every bold decision is going to end in triumph. And, but every attempt at emotional risk taking, like you're saying, like it's brave and it shows a lot of strength, and it is still a step forwards towards your growth.
Yeah, completely. I very much, all this stuff that I'm talking about was a real switch for me. Was that I was a passive participant in a lot of my relationships. I was very bad at expressing my needs. That would create a lot of distance. And obviously, my eating disorder was the most extreme version of that kind of behavior. And so I was very much alone by the end. So for me, it was reconnecting to old friendships. But as you said, a lot of it was actually reflecting and figuring out I was going to like do all this work and create this life for myself that I really wanted. And I got this opportunity to construct, all these areas of my life intentionally. My friendships, what did I want them to look like? How did I want them to feel? Who did I actually want in my
Yeah.
orbit? And so reflecting and figuring out what was actually going to support where I was in my life at that time. It was really interesting to see how clear it was who needed to be in that orbit and who didn't. And
Yeah.
then that was such a blueprint for, okay, if I want more of this, what kind of people do I want in my
Yeah.
environment versus
Yeah.
just being very passive and being like, whoever wants to spend time with me, I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important point. I see that come up so much in clients. It's like, it's not about the friends, it's about the quality of the friendships.
Yeah.
Because
And
again,
how you
that's kind of
truly
what,
walk away from it.
yeah, exactly. Because that kind of speaks to, like, everyone listened to our last episode where Byron's talking about this idea of like 6 out of 10 friendship, not friend, which means like, that friendship is like fine. Like it's a 6 out of 10. Maybe it's someone who's just been in your life for a really long time and it's fine. It's not necessarily toxic, but it's not necessarily like serving you either. And to
Yeah.
really like have a bit of a look at those kind of relationships as well, because maybe you are showing up in a passive way.
Yeah. I think having a clear list of, what are the important features of a friendship for you, but
Yeah.
making lists is not going to make change. You've got to be brave. You've got to reach out. You've got to ask. You've got to take an active role. And if you're doing that for the first time, which many of us probably are doing this work, it's going to be scary, but that is one of the things which links back to what we were saying before, putting in the effort and the work and moving through the discomfort. What greater reward is there than really true, genuine connection? So if there's anywhere in your life that's worth investing some of that tolerating discomfort, this is definitely one of them.
This is it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Why is the recover relapse cycle so common?
I mean, how long do we have? There's a lot of reasons for this
Pick a
one.
reason.
Well, I think one of them, of course, is focusing on the weeds, not the roots. Remembering, the behaviors are the symptoms, which we have to work on, but the root cause isn't gone just because the symptoms are. I always like to think of it as like black mold. If you're living in a tropical area, this would be a very familiar experience to you.
Yeah.
But if you only clean the surface and you don't look in the cracks and look behind the wood, it's going to be a really temporary band-aid. And I think another really important reason I think the relapse or recover cycle happens all the time is the sensitivity of maintenance phase of recovery, and that being overlooked is what I sort of am seeing a lot, because I think you could, once you're at this point of very minimal or no behavioral engagement and pretty close to having food freedom and freedom from rules, and your healthy self is very much leading the show. I'd say sort of like stage 9 of the recovery stages as per the 8 keys. This is not recovered it's a step closer for sure, but it's in this maintenance phase. And in that phase, I think it can be really easy to take your foot off the pedal with the hypervigilance of the eating disorder. I say to clients entering this phase, really consider this part of recovery like you're looking after a newborn baby. You're not going to take any risks with that newborn baby. So
Mm.
this looks like really keeping up that BS eating disorder radar with diet culture and exercise and conversations you're engaging with and content you're engaging with. Because I think when you are recovered from an eating disorder, you don't always have to put in as much effort as you did when you were moving through, the very acute phases of it, but you always have to have awareness of your mental history and you always need to know, what do you need to do to individually take care of yourself? Because that might look like not overwhelming your nervous system in a work environment, or it could, because that makes your mental health a bit wobbly, or it might look like always being organized on car trips with snacks, even if that the people you're driving with aren't going to be eating. It could be continuing to challenge that people pleasing tendency and ensuring you are continuing to advocate for your needs. And just on that, I think this continued effort and watchful eye over yourself in this maintenance phase is so important, because we're all going to encounter experiences that make life harder, right? Whether it's change in relationships or finance or grief or stressful life environments, like these things are going to happen to everyone. And of course, they're going to add layers of suffering and challenge that potentially could make recovery more difficult. So it's so important when you are at this point where you're pretty stable in your recovery to move through these experiences and learn how you continue to be adaptable, how you continue to support yourself as you go through these things that potentially weren't there when you were going through the initial phases of recovery as well. Because I think when people take off that effort that they're putting in and then these things kind of pop up, that's when relapse as a coping response for these life experiences can pop up really easily.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's at that later stage where people envision, oh, by the time I'm like towards the end, everything's going to be like super easy.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's not easier. It's certain areas have become easier. Like, probably urges aren't really showing up. If there are thoughts, it's pretty easy to you're not having like laborious long dialogues anymore. You're kind of having pretty quick responses. But then you're kind of more in the becoming comfortable with being a messy human being phase, as you were saying, like knowing they become less eating disorder triggers and more, what are your individual patterns as a human being, which get you out of regulation,
yes.
which make you
Like
feel
that.
disconnected from yourself. And that is difficult in a different way, which is just being a person. And I think that's when a lot of the reality hits, where people go, okay, my eating disorder is really getting towards the point where it's resolved. And now I'm having to sit with this reality of like, I am an imperfect, messy human being. And that's how it's going to be now, right? Like that we've got so many answers and so much clarity and so much growth. And it is such an illuminating, really incredible experience in so many ways. But that, as you said, like people are still going to pass away. Relationships are still going to break down. We're still going to have asshole bosses or really difficult, whatever, right? Like day-to-day stressors, really big life stressors. And a lot of that, I think, is the phase of, forgiving the fact that you are allowed to be imperfect, and you're allowed to struggle, and you're allowed to not always have the perfect response or be this Zen, all-knowing Yoda-like being. That's not the point of this process. But in terms of that, some of those common reasons why that relapse recover cycle happens, I think is sometimes also because of the parameters that we've put around recovery, and some of those very outdated treatment modalities are clashing with some of the more modern understandings of what's possible. I'll have a lot of people who reach out to me and say, well, Mia, I recovered, but I still agonize over my body every day. I still will use a behavior once or twice a year. And I'm like, that's not it. That's not it. Their idea of being recovered, and a lot of what the old guard still pushes to be recovered, is just to do with weight. That's it. Like they hit a BMI target and then they're told that they're recovered, and that's it. And as we know, it's about a million steps beyond that that really defines what it is to be a recovered person. And so I think that people, not that they become intentionally not apathetic. Well, yeah, apathetic, or they, as you say, like they're not doing that newborn baby kind of caring for their process in this really careful way, because they're told like, this is it, this is as far as you're going to get. And there's just so many things that haven't been addressed that of course they're going to trip and stumble because they haven't had a safety net put underneath them, aside from medical safety, which, as we know, means nothing. If you haven't cognitively changed, that medical stability means nothing in the long term.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's, I have so much frustration with old school sort of treatment beliefs and approaches, and what it's really done to people as far as what they think is possible, and therefore how they haven't been given the opportunity to, wherever they get off on that recovery train, to be able to secure their recovery in any real and meaningful way that keeps them safe.
Yes, I love everything that you're saying. And I think this is also why coaching is so powerful, and having people who come from lived experience in the space, because we can really give this understanding of this is what it means to be a recovered person, not this textbook example of it or what you were told by this GP who doesn't work in the mental health space.
I really sympathize with people who are in this cycle, because I think it can then have this impact, and I see it and hear it all the time, where people are very sort of traumatized by their recovery experience, and traumatized sometimes by their treatment experiences, where even when they come to me, so much of the initial work is, obviously there's always like a trust building phase with any new client, but there is such an extended trust building, and there is such an extended period of getting that person to dismantle all of their beliefs about not just what recovery is, but what their role is and what they're capable of. So I understand where it comes from, and I sympathize with people, and it's so much to say to somebody, no, but trust me, like trust what I'm saying, trust our process. And because they've heard that a million times before, right? But the difference is with ours is that, as we say, you can go at any time. I'm not going to chase you. I'm not going to send you a million emails. I'm not going to guilt you. I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to force you. None of it. So yeah, I have so much sympathy for it. I understand completely where it comes from.
Yeah.
So love this one. It's a bit tied to a few of the themes that have come up. How do I recover for myself? I know it has to come from me, but I just can't. I think even initially some of that self-talk, like whenever I have a client who says to me, I can't, I'll always say, right now you feel like you can't. You feel like that's the case. But saying declarative statements, like you are always listening to yourself. You are always listening to yourself. And if you say something enough, it will start to feel like truth, even if initially it just felt like fear or it just felt like uncertainty. If you hear something enough, and we've seen enough studies about this, if you hear something enough, even if you knew initially that it wasn't true, if you hear it repetitively, you start to absorb it as truth, because the brain is a computer. It does things very simply. It just wants to get to the fastest outcomes. Even if it's not the best outcome, it just wants to run the fastest program, which is why this intentional making it do something else, not using behaviors, doing the recovery thing, is so hard, because the brain just wants to go straight into that track that it's run down a million times. So if you keep telling yourself things and listening to yourself say the same pessimistic, hopeless thing over and over again, it's not just fear, it starts to feel factual. So I would even just challenge people to start to make those statements a bit more flexible. It's something that I know that you do, that you put really powerfully when you said to me once, I'll, like, if a client says to me, I can't do that, or this is hard, that's not the end of the sentence. This is hard, but I have evidence that I've been able to do hard things before. This feels impossible, but I do have demonstrations that it is actually quite possible. I'm just fearful of what's going to happen to me. So making these beliefs and these statements more flexible, because you have to remember you are always listening to yourself. So if it feels like that, say that it feels like that right now, but it doesn't have to be that way forever. You might be in a phase of recovery that is more mechanical, where you feel like you are doing it for other people. There's no wrong reason to recover, and your reasons for recovery are going to ebb and flow and change. Where initially, like, as you say, the amount of people who I see who when they tell me the history of their eating disorder and recovery, they started recovery maybe not by choice or under a lot of pressure and duress. But when they come to me, they say, I want to do this for me now. I want to be in a place where I feel like I'm running this process. So if that's your story, that is your story. And that isn't necessarily a
Yeah.
bad thing. Maybe that period or this period you're in is going to get you to this place where you feel
Yes.
more
Yes.
control and more autonomy and more agency. Maybe that's just part of your story. Your story isn't over yet.
Absolutely. And I think that strong connection to doing it for you, it can grow from something different or from something smaller. Like, even if there is like you're experiencing that little glimmer of like, okay, like, cool, I did this thing for me. Like, I'm feeling like I'm little allowing myself to feel the pride for that. That's a little single moment of hope, and we can work with that. I think you're so right. Like, we don't need to be focusing on the definitive, like, I can't recover. It's like, okay, well, like I can't go to space, but I probably could maybe if I started looking at like what are the things that I can do like today or this week or this month to really orientate me in that direction. If it's something I do want to be able to do, just because I feel like I can't doesn't mean that you don't want to. And then it's like, is it can't or it won't? Because I then think we're coming back to autonomy. It's like, don't say, you know, I can't do this. It's like, okay, well, I won't do this. Because then that instantly, it's because of the dialogue, you put the responsibility back on yourself, and it's like, okay, so this is a different situation now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that this is what I find so fascinating about coaching and why I love things like dialoguing and because so much of it is about what are we telling ourselves? What are we saying to ourselves? It all
absolutely.
comes down to language. Language is so
Yeah.
powerful. And so being able to be very, very conscious and aware of the claims that you're making, that your eating disorder is making, and holding it accountable for the language that it's using. And if you can't totally change the language and what you think and feel and believe, just flex it up a little bit.
Yes, exactly, exactly. I feel like I remember like reading in a book once, it said like don't believe everything your mind says to you, particularly on a bad day.
Yeah, your thoughts and feelings are data. They're not who you are.
Yeah.
And you get to
Yeah,
pick and choose what is helpful and what isn't,
absolutely.
and what you're going to be guided by.
Absolutely.
So they're all the questions for this Q&A, but every time we do this, we get a bunch, and we really like to do them because it, like I said, gives us fresh things to discuss and answer, and you guys always come up with amazing questions. So this is not the last time we'll be doing this. Hol, the next time we have a podcast go up, I think that you're going to not be with us anymore. That I just made it sound like you put something like terminal.
Okay,
No,
I'm never
she's
going to be back
fine.
on the podcast. Am I getting fired or am I dying?
No, it all sounds very severe and terrifying.
Just kidding. I'll be surfing in Portugal.
Oh, shut up. I'm so excited to kind of do a little bit of like half the podcast on the road. I think that that's going to be incredible. Please, lots of photos on Instagram. I know that we don't love the gram all the time, but I am going to need fresh updates.
I'll try. I'm gonna put more of an effort into it. Because
Thank
obviously I'm gonna be romanticizing my life. The romance of traveling alone.
Filters, music overlay. Oh, I mean,
You guys just wait.
Not unreal.
I'll do it just for you.
Thank you very much. I'll see you before everyone else gets to see you, but we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
We'll see you then.